Greetings and good tidings, you good people. Welcome to Stone by Stone, an Edgewater Castle podcast, where we peel back the layers of the beautiful game like the 32-paneled onion that it is. Join me, Andrew Swanson, your host, as we engage in some insightful conversations with some very remarkable individuals. These brave souls will share their unique perspectives on the world and its game, their personal narratives, and how football has woven itself into the fabric of their lives like the thread in a highly personalized quilt. A heartfelt thank you to our production sponsors, Tightrope Recording, for their masterful sound engineering, and to our dedicated listeners. Your continued support means the absolute world to us, so thank you for it. Now, hear ye, gather round the hearth, pour something literally or figuratively warm into your cups, and welcome to Stone by Stone. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Stone by Stone. I'm your host, Andrew Swanson, and I'm very, very, very excited to be joined today by Professor Andy Markovits. Andy, welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Andrew, for having me.
Absolutely.
And from one Andrew to another.
Yeah, it's a good, strong name. I've always said it. Well, yeah, thank you so much, Andy. For our listeners' context, I'll just give a little background on how we first met. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, the first time I sort of heard of you and your work was through your interview with the late great Grant Wall on his show, which I believe was Planet Football.
Yes, I was a repeated guest on there.
You were.
In fact, it's very funny. I actually mentioned this in my book on women's soccer, which I dedicated to Grant. And Grant actually always called me his. It escapes me now for a second. There was Charles Grodin. His Charles Grodin. Charles Grodin was this actor who appeared on Letterman all the time for no reason. I mean, he didn't hawk a movie. He didn't hawk nothing. He just appeared because Letterman liked him. So that's why he always... Grant called me his Charles Grodin. I mean, Andy just comes on for whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you're a very unique person, especially in the world of soccer. And that's sort of, one of the reasons I was very excited to speak with you all those years ago. And for our audience today, Andy and I haven't spoken in probably 5-6 years. It's been a long time.
Yes.
But, when I heard you talking to Grant in that episode and sort of talking about your books and the work you've done on essentially like soccer anthropology is sort of a way I've sort of started to think of it over the years. It just really fascinated me because I was new to the game of soccer myself. And I was also sort of a nerd when it comes to history and cultures and people and the depth at which you go into cultures and the way sports in general and soccer specifically really impact them was very, very cool to me. And I very voraciously read Offside, which was, I think, the book that was coming out at the time. And I just loved it. I think you're an incredibly smart person. So I'm very, very grateful to have you here. Thank you again for
Thank you for having me. I'm honored.
Fantastic. Well, we're going to start off at the present, and then we're going to work we're going to go in a time machine back to your early days and up through your life a bit back to the present. But why don't you tell our listeners who you are, where you work right now, what your life is like, and what sort of work you've been doing over the last few years?
Okay. Well, I'm Andy Markovits, actually the Carl W. Deutsch Collegiate Professor for German Studies and Comparative Politics, Emeritus.
Ooh.
I am now, this is my first year of retirement. I'm not very good at it, by the way, but that's a whole different topic. I taught for 50 years at university, 25 at the University of Michigan from 1999 until 2024, and 25 years elsewhere, the University of California, Santa Cruz, Boston University, Wesleyan University, Harvard, West End, Santa Cruz, Boston. I think I mentioned all of them.
Yeah, we're impressed. Don't worry.
No. So various places. Also, of course, quite a bit in Europe, visiting professors. And actually, I'm the most sort of pleased I am is that the Technical University of Dortmund, has appointed me 3 times as a Fußballprofessor. This is my official title. And it was for 2006, the World Cup in Germany. I was a Fußballprofessor. Second one was this past year for the Euro, which was held in Germany. And the third installment will be this summer when the Euro, the women's Euro, will be held in Switzerland. Not quite Germany, but close enough.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I've taught in a number of places. It was only starting through one particular article, which became my most successful one, and I think appeared in 19 languages. Namely, Why Is There No Soccer in America? The Other American Exceptionalism, Why Is There No Soccer in America? Which then led to the book that you mentioned in 2001. My main day job was to study political sociology of advanced industrial societies, particularly in Western Europe. So I did a lot on social democracy, labor, the new social movements, green parties, all these things. And in the background, my hobby was always sports. And I went to all these games, and I'm not only soccer in Europe, but baseball, basketball, football, and hockey in America. And so I always nothing bespoke this huge Atlantic Ocean divide more than the Andy Markovits of sports. Everything else was very integrated, all integrated and very similar. But when I arrived in Europe, things didn't mean anything about the NBA. This was a different world. It's very different today. We can talk about that. And basically, people may have heard of the Lakers, but it was my sports world was totally separate and different. And the same with here and soccer. It was seen as this immigrant sport, boring, for sissies. And I decided to actually do this research of why America opted out of soccer, so to speak, and it was very historical. And that then became an immensely successful article, which then led to the book, and which then led to my entrance of sports and the study of sports in a macro way, the way I do it in the academy. And I will always bless the University of Michigan's Department of Sociology, who allowed me to teach a course called Sports, Politics, and Society when I arrived here. This was, by the way, the Department of Political Science did not. This was not acceptable. It was still sports. What is this? You had this obviously in schools of kinesiology, and you had this sort of for, of course, major studies about sort of injuries or a lot about athletes themselves, but very few people studied larger trends of the sports consumers, sports as culture. And this was seen as, in some ways, illegitimate. And I always say that had I not established a very, very eminent reputation with my earlier life, namely with having built up my studies in social democracy, on anti-Americanism, I've written a couple of books on European anti-Americanism, on anti-Sam, all kinds of weighty topics, the sports thing would have not been accepted. Now it is, although not totally. Meaning I have still one doctoral student who was making noise about doing a dissertation in sports. And I said, absolutely not. You can't do it. Because I want you to get a job at a great university, and you will not do this in sports. Not this kind of, it just won't happen. So my escapades into the world of sports, which yielded Offside, Soccer, and American Exceptionalism, which yielded, I think, a book I'm maybe even more proud of, Gaming the World, how sports explains the global culture. Also, the book Sportista, which somehow never really got off the ground. I'm very pleased with that. It was actually a very detailed study of female viewership or a female following or of how sports used to be. It's still totally gendered, but of course, I published a number of things which are all fine and dandy, but in some ways I always saw this as a luxury, as a my own hobby, my own leisure, which the Department of Sociology at Michigan indulges in. Then, of course, it became a hugely popular course, and the political science department jumped on it. And now it's massively, I mean, it's now totally accepted. I have, at the end, there were 4 or 5 teaching assistants. I mean, it's a big course.
Yeah.
And there you have it. I mean, so I continue to obviously follow sports, but that's just my hobby. But I actually always write about it in some ways, or I see things. For example, I'm totally struck. I mean, I always talk about this in my books about the power of nationalism. And man, oh man, is that powerful now with this completely new, invented all-star break. I mean, it's incredible. It's insane. This was NHL didn't know what to do. It was basically kind of all-star games completely were breaking away. It was all kinds of gimmicks, whatever. They said, let's do this 4-nation thing. And I mean, all the experts say, it's not going to be. And I, for somehow said to a number of people, this is going to be huge, especially the U.S.-Canada thing. It doesn't matter that there's no gold medal or trophy. It's about rivalries. It's about nationalism. And in fact, this is how it's marketed. They pride. I mean, fascinating.
Yeah, it's there's a bit of a precedent for how that can be marketing wise a successful venture in many cases. I'm very, very interested to talk to you more about the sort of the nationalism within sports, especially here in the U.S., as we go further into the episode and looking at the World Cup coming here, the political ecosystem here in the U.S., all of that stuff. But before we go there, I think that in order to really understand your work, it's helpful to understand your perspective on the world. You're obviously a very educated, very knowledgeable person, but you also have, in my opinion, a bit of a global perspective of things, and you really understand a lot of different parts of the world, especially the sort of connections between European culture and American culture and the differences therein. I'm curious to know about your upbringing a little bit and how you became you. Tell me about your life as a kid.
Afterwards, I want your address, and I'd like to send you my memoir, which has been actually quite successcul.
I've heard a lot about your memoir. It's one of the few books of yours I haven't read, so I very much like that.
I'll send it to you gladly, and I'll sign it. And I was born in the western part of Romania, not in Transylvania, but close to Transylvania, in the Hungarian-speaking part of the western Romania, to a Jewish mother and father, both Holocaust-ravaged people. And I grew up speaking Hungarian and German at home, and also learning Romanian and actually English already on the side. My mother died, and we left in 1958 when I was 9 years old to the West and went to Vienna. And in Vienna, we actually were waiting to enter the United States. The Romanian quota at the time, it was still the quota system, which existed until the immigration law of 1965. Waiting there. In the meantime, this took a long time. In the meantime, my father somehow got settled in some ways, and I always say that the part of culture is very important. He was closer to Budapest in Vienna than in New York. And so, to make it a long story short, which I elaborate a long time in the book, I went to this fancy gymnasium, this secondary school, where I learned, some important things, but above all, I hated it. But that's a different story. But soccer plays an important role because, of course, we were not allowed to play soccer because soccer was proletarian.
Of course, yeah.
It's elite school, and you don't play soccer. which is, and when we played it in the classroom, literally with some, soccer is so amazing that you can play it anywhere.
Yep.
We took one shirt, put it, with some Scotch tape around it. That was the ball, and we kicked it around. This was incredible. And all of this was completely disallowed in this school because it was sort of saw itself as anyway. So I finished that school, but of course I also spent summers already in the 60s in New York. So I grew up with soccer in Europe, but already with baseball in New York. Mm-hmm. So in some ways, actually, it all goes back to childhood. My two main sports, I know a lot of many others, but the main sports are clearly soccer and baseball because they go back to my youth. Soccer goes back to when I was a little boy.
Yeah.
And I discuss the major importance of the West German Hungary final in 1954 in Bern in Switzerland, which was actually on the 4th of July, and this was really a major influence on me. It's the first time I ever heard about America. And in 1958, I will never forget, the crash on February 6th. I heard this in a Romanian radio when the Busby Babes crashed in Munich. And since then, I have remained a loyal and devoted Manchester United fan who is suffering massively and mightily at the moment, where we are playing unbelievably. We are in the danger of potentially being relegated. It's just insane.
Yeah.
But let's not go there.
Sure. Yeah. I wasn't gonna dig too deep into the current state of Manchester United, but I was curious, actually. I'm glad you mentioned that because I was curious about your introduction to Manchester United, and it sounds like the plane crash.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
And in fact, my colleague Stefan Szymanski, who has written obviously Soccernomics, and he's actually also a Michigan professor. In one of his books on soccer, he has a whole passage of, he talks about various teams, and he talks about Manchester United being this global team, and actually starts by it became distinct via the plane crash. And then he actually talks about my colleague and friend Andy Markovits became a huge Manchester United fan by virtue of this. And he actually argues that separated United from many other teams at the time, like Liverpool or Bolton Wanderers or Wolverhampton Wanderers, which is very good, mm-hmm. and many of the Midlands of northern teams, and Manchester United. So that was my introduction to Manchester United. I did not appear in Old Trafford until actually the early 80s. And then starting in the 90s, I went quite regularly. And of course, in the glorious years of the 90s.
Good timing, yeah.
Good timing. And the Ferguson years, I went a lot.
Yeah.
And so anyway, that's the Manchester United connection.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I think, it's interesting to think about that specifically as you mentioned that's an event that really separated Man United from any other team because of the scale of tragedy and the sort of scale of emotion wrapped up in the Busby Babes as this like massive potential kind of squandered by tragedy. And that seed planted.
And then 10 years later, literally, with Sir Bobby Charlton, who survives the crash in Munich in 1968, they lift the European Cup. The Champions League Cup, called different European Cup, in London, beating Benfica.
Yeah,
and he was actually the bookends of this are massive. Also, United being the first English team to win that competition,
of course. And then fast forwarding to, like you said, the Ferguson era and the class of '93, and the sort of like everything has this kind of echo to it at Man United in a way, right? Where
no question.
Yeah, I think that's really amazing.
And in a weird way, not with tragedy, but actually that's the same when I arrived in New York. I will always give my father immense credit, just unbelievable, that my father decided that summer when we arrived in 1960 that he would take me to see the Yankees because a young boy should learn about sports. And there he sat, this man at the time in his early 50s, bored to tears because he didn't know. He'd seen baseball, right?
Yeah.
But he sat there quietly and patiently for me to learn about the Yankees or about baseball.
Yeah.
And boy, was it important. I mean, in terms of the funneling of my Americanness, he was spot on correct.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I arrived at Columbia in 1967 to finally stay here for good, even though I grew up in Vienna and Romania, but with my summers in New York, I actually arrived as an American boy.
Yeah.
I know baseball. I know football much less, but I knew a little bit. So Johnny Unitas. I mean, it's enough to go to my first Columbia Princeton game, and next to me a guy said, you know a lot about football. I was just so flattered. Better than 4 A's. Much. And so anyway, that's my road, my into America is obviously rock music and sports. And in Europe, it's sports, but it was always a different sport.
Yeah.
So I arrive and you literally have to rethink. The grammar is different. Suddenly the history is different. Nobody knows anything about Mickey Mantle. Nobody knows anything here about, Bobby Charlton.
Puskás.
Puskás. Oh my God, I'm so impressed.
This is, to be fair, I pulled that out the first time we talked, and I impressed you with it then. So this is an echo as well.
Well, I'm still impressing.
Did you see Puskás play?
I saw him play, but with Real Madrid.
Wow.
The Hungarian Revolution starts in '56. I mean, because there's no television. My first television is in Vienna. I remember seeing a football match and with a bottle of Coca-Cola. This was heaven. But no television. So no, I never saw Puskás with the Hungarians other than on film. Gotcha. I saw him with Real Madrid. In fact, that legendary 1960s Real Madrid final in Hampden Park in Scotland when they destroyed Eintracht Frankfurt 7-3.
Wow.
And this was the White Ballet, and Puskás was there, and Alfredo Di Stefano, and Gento on the left side, and of course Santa Maria in the middle of the it was an amazing team. But that's why I saw Puskás. I never saw him. Yeah. And then I saw him actually in person in 1971 at Wembley Stadium when he was the coach. He was the manager of Panathinaikos.
Right. I remember. I don't remember that, but I do remember because he was also coaching them against Nottingham Forest in the final in 76 or 77 or something.
Amazing. And he coached them in 1971 or 2 against Ajax. That was the Ajax that won 3 in a row before Bayern Munich takes over.
Was that Cruyff? Ajax?
Oh, yeah. Cruyff, Neskens, my dream. I mean, unbelievable. So I saw that. I remember finishing my finals at Columbia, already in graduate, and jetting over and arriving in the morning of the Panathinaikos Ajax game in Wembley to watch this.
Oh my God. Yeah, that's an absolute dream scenario.
And in my memoir, there's actually a whole chapter on a Champions League final between Inter Milan and Real Madrid, apropos Puskás, in 1964.
Wow. And
it actually, I describe it as actually the first time I really kiss a woman, because Sandro Mazzola scores a beautiful goal for Inter, and I took up the courage to kiss this woman with whom I went to this game, who, by the way, knew nothing about Real, knew nothing about Inter, nothing. But I really wanted to impress her, to take her to the first Champions League final in Vienna ever. She was not impressed.
Well, you can't win them all. You can't win them all, Andy. Yeah. Well, great. I mean, we've touched on so many things that are going to lead us further into this conversation. In a couple minutes, we're going to take a very brief break, just in case any of our sponsors want to say anything. But I am very curious about the way you interpret soccer cultures, because I think it's really, really important in a game like soccer, football globally, to just have a better understanding of how to sort of read the health of a soccer culture. or rather the strength of one. And I think that in some ways, you've obviously experienced some of the more well-known, famous, and incredible moments in soccer history in Europe, right? So you've
Yes.
seen Real win a European Cup. You've seen Puskás coaching a Greek team in a European Cup, right? So how do you sort of if you can give anyone advice on how to sort of like have a barometer for what's going on around them and in their own environments for what a soccer culture is like, and then also what are some of the most easy to pinpoint soccer cultures around the world?
I hate to disappoint you on this, but I don't think I can do any advice with this.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think fandom is different in hockey or basketball, whatever, from soccer. It has something to do. It's a form. Look, it's all about charisma. As the great Max Weber, the great German sociologist who writes a lot about charisma, ultimately it's a form of authority. It actually writes about authority.
Mm-hmm.
The three kinds of authority: charismatic, traditional, and legal, rational. And basically, it's a form of authority, or it's a form of authenticity that is established with the following, and you can't quite explain it. It's there. It's like, falling in love. I can't, and so, especially in this day and age, when things have become so fluid. I mean, Andrew, when I arrived at Michigan, and I started to teach this course, and very quickly it became a large course. I would occasionally see a Barca shirt or a Real Madrid or Man United shirt. By the time I stopped teaching it in 2023, they were sporting Lisbon shirts and Dukla Prague. I mean, it's just like, whoa, what is this? Just like when I thought in Europe, again in Germany, some guy walks in with an Oklahoma City shirt. I mean, what I'm saying here is that the affinity to these things has become much more fluid because of technology. You can actually now become and be a huge Bayern Munich fan or whatever, and when you live in Santa Cruz, California. Now, what is so interesting is that somehow real authenticity, especially in soccer, because the fandoms are so close, is still related to the local. So somehow a Bayern Munich fan, although totally devoted, from Santa Cruz, is not the same as the one from Munich. To the one in Munich.
Sure.
I'll give you one example, actually. Old Trafford, Man United, Everton, mid-90s or something. And my American accent clearly is defined as the other. I cannot be a genuine United fan. I'm an imposter in some ways. Sure. Until I mentioned that I actually started in 1958. Oh my God. Suddenly authenticity is created. Okay? But still, my point is that affinities are much more fluid today, much more open, much more. If you can put up with weird sleeping habits, by the way, Andrew, the last 4 years, I refused to teach my sports spotting society class on Tuesday and Wednesday afternoons. I just did. Because I noticed already by, I think, just pre-COVID, that half the class was, watching a Champions League game under the table.
Yep.
And I said, I can't compete with Real Madrid. What's going on? At least tell me what's the score.
Yeah, yeah, of course.
But I'm not going to do it. You can't. This is new. This is even, I would say, not until basically 2013, 14, 15. I'm not quite sure what. Obviously, technology has a huge importance, the iPhone and so on. It was still not the case. I remember distinctly Man United Milan semifinal in 2000, Champions League 2006 or 7, when Milan actually goes on either to lose to Liverpool or beat Liverpool. I forget now when that is, but they meet United. And I remember mentioning it to the class, and it was still like, oh, that's nice. Professor Markovits follows this, but okay, yeah, it's good. Some of them knew about it. Knew of Milan, but it was not like today, where half the class, above all, half the male population of the class, it has their iPhone under the table and watch the game.
Right.
That's new. And that, of course, changes everything. It changes the discourse. It changes the sophistication. I have some American students who are much more attuned to what's going on now in the soccer world than I am. I don't know, transfers and whatever, and who is Arsenal pinpointing in some Brazilian league. I don't know this.
Yeah.
They do.
Yeah.
And they're kids from the Upper Peninsula. It's just amazing.
Yeah, that is amazing. And I think the way access to games, access to technology and players through social media, and being able to follow individual players more closely, with things like that is definitely a way for people to get more involved.
Well, yeah, yesterday the languages. Yesterday apparently when Messi scored the goal, he goes like this 3 times, imitating Steph Curry, with whom he's very close friends. Wow, this is impossible.
Yeah.
It just wouldn't have happened. Messi would not know about, Maradona, let's take the equivalent. Maradona did not go this because he was following, let's say who was,
Larry
Michael
Bird.
Jordan.
Sure.
Larry Bird.
Yeah.
Exactly. Larry Bird, he may have heard of Larry Bird, somehow because, but he didn't know. Larry Bird was not a part of his life.
Yeah.
Steph is part of Messi's life. By the way, before coming to the U.S., this goes back to, so clearly they are completely intertwined. And this is amazing.
Yep. Game recognized game. That's what they call that.
Yes.
So we're going to take a little break, and then we will be right back, and we're going to talk a little more about the upcoming World Cup in the United States and United States' relationship to soccer and how that has evolved over the years.
Oh, I'd love to.
I've been enjoying it so far, so we will be right back, folks, with the rest of this episode. Talk to you soon. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Stone by Stone. I am still, luckily, joined here by Andy Markovits. Andy, how's your ad break been?
Oh, fine.
Good. Nothing's changed in the last couple minutes?
No, nothing's changed.
Fantastic. So we're going to jump into a pretty important touchstone for soccer globally, which is coming up here in the United States in 2026. The World Cup is arriving here in the United States in 26. And I'm curious to sort of hear about your experiences with World Cups over the years, if you have any, and sort of hear your take on the importance of that tournament for soccer as sort of a global entity.
Oh, wow. So I've been to World Cup 66 in England, 74 in Germany, 82 in Spain, 90 in Italy, 94 in the United States, bi-coastally, Boston and Stanford, Foxborough and Stanford, 2006, Germany. So basically, I've never been to Latin America or South Africa. Yeah. Amazing experiences. It's just amazing. I've also been to a couple of Euros, which are in some ways World Cups with the exception with no Argentina, Brazil, and Uruguay.
Right.
But 1994, absolutely crucial. But it was basically, as I wrote in an article, when the circus comes to town. In other words, FIFA rented the United States. It was far and away the most successful World Cup they ever had. 92% full. Look, I never forget. If you, on a Wednesday afternoon in June, I never forget this, Wednesday afternoon, a game between Morocco and Saudi Arabia. Okay. in the Meadowlands has, I don't know, 60,000 viewers, I rest my case. Which, by the way, much of the rest of the soccer world saw as a yet another form of American idiocy or American non-soccerness of being not really, because to them basically a game between England and Germany is the same as between Morocco.
Sure. They don't know any better, basically.
Exactly. They don't know any better. Absolutely. And in fact, in Italy, I remember this amazing, the Gazzetta dello Sport or whatever, I think wrote an article how an equivalent game in Italy 4 years before between Bulgaria and Paraguay in Naples was attended by 6,000 people. In other words, showing the maturity of the Italian viewer as opposed to the immaturity of the American one.
Yeah.
I think this also has abated some, but still exists in many ways. So World Cup phenomenal coming here. I think this is the gateway for America to become a soccer country. We are on the way to that. We're not there yet quite. And what I mean by this, again, for me, it's ultimately about culture. For me, I want ESPN, PTI, or whatever, for them to argue about why Pochettino is an idiot for playing, so and so mid left, or why not forward? In other words, to me, sports culture, as my wife so beautifully said, is not about the game. It's what happens between the games.
Right.
It's the constant talk. It's the guessing, the involvement. That's the thick culture, to use I love. I use a word from anthropology. The thick culture. The thick is exactly, and this soccer exists more than ever in America, but it's still slightly ghettoized. In other words, still folks like you and me and others, still part of the soccer world. And I think that with the World Cup coming here, it may easily proliferate into the rest of it, bleeds into American sports culture.
Mm-hmm. Can you explain the word ghettoize to our audience, just for the sake of?
Well, it's basically what I mean by this is it's only for the specialists or people people who already who are in the enclosed world of soccer, where they are very conversant and following it and knowing it, whatever. But it's still in many ways a subset. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
And I want it to become ubiquitous. Okay.
Right.
In other words, I want Pulisic. Let me put it this way: I want Pulisic, or the equivalent. I want Pulisic to be as known as Steph Curry.
Yep.
And he's not.
Yep.
He's better known than many of his predecessors. Better known than probably Alexi Lalas, whatever. But he was known because of his hair, whatever. And but basically, for various spotty appearances, like in 1994, for basically American soccer players remained, in this case, sort of enclosed. Mm-hmm. And I think the World Cup will break it with the following caveat. I think the American team has to do well. Mm. And what I mean by well is, obviously, ideally, Pochettino is crazy winning the championship. It's not going to happen. But go to the quarterfinals or maybe even the semifinals and lose in a glorious game to Argentina, yep, or to England, mm-hmm, or to Germany. In other words, the soccer powers.
Sure.
Just in this case, it's way beyond Mexico. It's got to be the established Brazil, Argentina. Okay. And if that's the case, I think that this would propel the game into general culture. It's already much more than before. I look at the ticker on at ESPN. All the European games are listed. Mm-hmm. Injuries are listed. I mean, this is actually very new, but I want it to be sort of really discussed SportsCenter mentions it. Last night on SportsCenter from LA, Stan Verrett talked about the 3 Mbappe goals, or was it nice, against Real Madrid? Against City. He also showed one other game. I think, Fiorentina beating Milan. I'm sorry, Fiorentina, Feyenoord. Feyenoord beating Milan. It's entering what Markovits calls sports space.
Yes.
It's entering, they're on the top 10 list. Great. It's got to, and I think American soccer, once we also change the timing of things, once we go into the international calendar, as I argued in an article, the United States, I call the article American soccer from the Pele's periphery to Messi's semi-periphery.
Wow.
Will we, however, go into the core? I'll send you the article once we're off. Okay?
Yeah.
It's huge difference. When Pele was here, this was periphery. And I follow here a very, very important concept in political economy by a very eminent guy called Emmanuel Wallerstein, who looks at center core and semi-peripheral relations in global economies. And that's exactly how I would look at soccer too. The periphery supplies labor power to the center. The center in soccer is still clearly Western Europe.
Yeah.
Okay, that's where everything is. That dominates. Just like with all other the 4 other sports, the center is the United States.
Yeah.
Every great basketball player wants to play in the NBA. Okay? And hockey players, they play, the Swedes, the Finns are all playing in the NHL. And the best American soccer players play in the EPL or in the so the center periphery. At the moment, we're still not quite center. We are semi-periphery. Messi is important in propelling us towards a periphery, but I ultimately think that for it to towards the center, and for it to be a center, I also think that it would help to have an American-born player.
Yeah, absolutely.
Again, back to nationalism. It's a form. It's not essential, but it would really help.
Yeah,
to make it even more popular and more accepted, as it is already not seen as foreign, but it's still a part. And I think the World Cup has the potential to actually propel it into the center.
Yeah.
And it
absolutely.
can only be done, sports culture can, at the moment, this may change the next 15, 20 years, but at this moment, it can only be done by men, the men's team. Now, the glory of the women's team, which is phenomenal, unbelievable. It's insanely good. Everybody recognizes that, but the women cannot yet. This is not sexism. And women at the moment cannot create this thick description, meaning where it's starting to with the WNBA and Caitlin Clark, God bless her, unbelievable. Meaning where, again, it's not the game that matters, it's between the game.
Right.
And
people talking about Caitlin Clark everywhere you go.
Exactly. And who should play her? Already this, should she be more on the wing? Wow, amazing. Okay. And that women's soccer has these, it's all driven by events, and they're phenomenal at the events, and they're winning all these, and much better than men. But events themselves, though glorious, are not sufficient to create a lasting culture in which the event actually, it doesn't matter. That's my point.
Of course.
You are really part of a thick culture if in fact there are no games.
Absolutely. Yes. Of course. I do. That's really fascinating. I agree in a way in terms of the perspective of running a club, right? So I run a club here in Chicago, obviously a very packed sports space.
Yes.
One of the more packed sports spaces in the world, probably in terms of density.
Yes.
And the truth is, your games are basically just the product that your ecosystem puts out, right? Like,
yes.
ecosystem is what you're really selling all the time.
Yes,
That's what a
yes,
club is. That's what I sort of think of as when I say soccer cultures, right? What I think of are the ecosystems that have that thick culture to them that you've described, right? Where
yes,
you
yes,
walk in, you go to Manchester or Liverpool or Madrid or Barcelona or Lisbon or wherever, and you get near a stadium or you go anywhere, you sort of understand that game or that club is intrinsic to the place, right?
yes,
They are merged and they go hand in hand, and that's in my opinion has a lot to do with just the amount of time they've had to
yes,
ferment,
yes, of course.
right?
Yeah, I mean, the Cubs are the same in Chicago.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly. And
absolutely.
that's I think, just by math, we've got a long way to go here. I
Yes,
think.
but I agree with you. But also, don't forget, it's a different form of communication.
Mhm.
Meaning, I think it could be sped up, and it is. In other
Yeah.
words, TikTok culture. It's different from my father who went to a cafe or a bar, or where it was all basically around. I mean, it's a speedier thing, so that which actually is an advantage for soccer now. So
Mhm.
soccer can speed it up again. Valorize the fact that half the men in my sports class are watching soccer games on their iPhones.
Yeah.
And here, by the way, there is a very tall order for MLS, but I think MLS is doing a very good job. But because in some ways, these kids are watching the best of the best.
Mhm.
So they're not watching the LA Galaxy. Of course, it's not during class time anyway, but they're not watching the LA Galaxy play the New York Red Bulls with the same dedication as they're watching Liverpool play Barcelona.
Right.
And and today's technology makes Liverpool, Barcelona completely local to Ann Arbor, and that's
Yes.
very hard. Basically, it's difficult for MLS to compete, but yet it must exist. You can't just have a virtual, or you need the local thing.
Yeah, absolutely. That's awesome. And I think, I've always been, obviously, having gotten into soccer pretty late myself like I didn't get really into soccer until we met, essentially.
Wow.
Yeah, so I got interested in it at like 28, very
Ah,
randomly, and here I am. But when I think about the U.S. and I think about how much more effort has to be put in to try to catch up. And that's sort of how I think a lot of people in the US in soccer feel, is like, oh, we gotta catch up, like we gotta try to find a way to stay relevant in the global market, is how they put it, probably, right? From a corporate perspective in MLS. But to me, I think there is such a difference in the amount of time that these cultures have existed consistently, right, with momentum. And you're right. I think that with technology, things can be sped up and interest can be piqued more quickly. I got into the game mostly because of the game FIFA, and then just randomly watching
there you
a
go. There you go.
Champions League game, right? So that's a great example. But I do think that, one of the big differences to me, and this is, speaking with some bias as someone who runs a lower league team, that ecosystems require rungs on the ladder to be close enough to each other that there's sort of a future up and down in some direction, right? Not necessarily just with promotion and relegation that happens in, everywhere else. But I think there is something to the fact of, like, to me at least, an ecosystem isn't just the tip of a spear, right? And that's a little bit how things feel in the US compared to other places, where the US's ecosystem is very wide and consists of small clubs and MLS, right? But the sort of space between the entities doing it, right? The space between MLS and a second division club, and the space between a USL Championship second division club and a third division club, those gaps are enormous, right? So like the ability for, I think, people running clubs to feel as though they're all a part of the same ecosystem is sort of challenging here, just
Yeah.
speaking from my perspective. And that, like, obviously the Wrexhams of the world that have now kind of come into the public consciousness as a lower division club,
Yes.
That started to paint the picture a little more for people in the US. But I do think that because MLS has only been around for 30 years now,
Yes. Yes.
that's not a very long time for,
No.
for
No.
consistency, you know, compared to 150 or whatever in the Scottish
Yes.
first
Yes.
tier. So yeah, I mean, I'm very curious about how the upcoming World Cup, the sort of like somewhat peripheral attention being paid to lower teams getting promoted and like, you know, the pop culture aspect of soccer between the games, which I think is things like Ted Lasso and
Yes.
Welcome to
Huge.
Wrexham and things like
Huge.
that. Like you said, it sort of adds to the cultural fabric
Huge.
of the
Ted
game.
Lasso.
But yeah, I'm very, very interested to see how a World Cup in this digital era in the United States with a really impressive momentum behind MLS and a pretty strong entity running the second and third divisions. It's an exciting time. I'm sort of
Yes.
curious to see, what do you think the landscape, you know, putting on your Nostradamus hat here, what do you think the landscape of soccer in the US will look like compared to today in, you know, 4 years, 5 years?
I think the U.S. I think soccer will enter the Markovitsian sports space, meaning that it will become more and more talked about, more and more fretted about, more and more. It'll be certainly on the level of a hockey,
Yeah,
no question. Maybe even surpass it. Um, it. I don't think will. Certainly not in my lifetime. Not even close to football. It won't happen. But it'll become a very important non-alien. Okay, it will not non-alien and non-exotic curiosity. It'll become part of quotidian, daily American culture, and not only those who play it. But in fact, people, again, for the couch potatoes. And for that, the World Cup is absolutely crucial. And again, I think crucial that the American, because the interest lags when it's not your nation. I mean, it does. Whether that's good or bad, I mean, on some level, I hate nationalism, but it's just reality. And I saw even in the World Cup when Germany lost to Spain. I mean, not the World Cup, in last
Euros, yeah.
Amazing. I mean, it's just, suddenly the world around me in Dortmund just changed. I mean, until then, it was completely, what are they eating for breakfast? Why is one guy's girlfriend, ornery? I mean, whatever. I mean, that's what I mean by thick description. Okay, not how he plays, but it's all this. This actually completely vanished. The German team lost, over, poof, gone. And and the English take over and take all the tickets, and it's just crazy. So clearly, nationalism, for better or worse, is a major driving force, and all over, including the United States. And so that's why I think it's very important that I'm very, very brilliant that Pochettino is our coach. I wish him well. I just, it's crucial. It's a very, very important era for it to succeed.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're getting close to the end here. But I'm curious to hear what you think about the nationalism. Is a tough word in America these days. And I don't want to get too deep into, the exclusively political world of things, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts on, the current president in the United States and the sort of way things are moving with him coming into his second term now, as it relates to a World Cup, and as it relates to the way the globe looks at the United States as they're about to come visit us.
Oh God.
Sorry to finish us off with this one, but
no, please. I also don't want to speak my mind on this because it'll be not pretty, but despondent about
Yes.
what's going on. But that's not the issue here. Look, people will come to the U.S. regardless. England qualifies, they're going to come.
Yep.
Germany, they're going to come. And the fans are not going to be worried about whether Trump is basically completely selling out Ukraine, and which is
all of the above. Yeah.
It's Munich 2.0. Referring to 1938. So I don't think soccer fans will worry about this. I think it'll be a superbly organized thing. FIFA will take over. By the way, Infantino, of course, is best buddy with, close.
Oh, yeah.
Friend.
I've seen a lot of those photo ops myself.
Yeah. So I don't think that my worries and others' worries, and including by the Europeans' worries about Trump and Trumpism will have any effect on the World Cup per se. I really don't see it. It's going to be summer. If anything, there will be issues of distance. I always find that a bit of a problem in America. You can't just hop on a train like in Germany, and it's just.
Yeah.
But it'll be superb. I can't wait. I'm very sad that Chicago didn't bid. Incredible.
Yeah, it's a tough one.
So the closest to me will be Toronto.
Yep. It's pretty close, right?
It's pretty clear. It's pretty close. Kansas City, that's not so good. Philly, but I'll travel. Look, I'm a man of leisure. And, I would use lots of my remaining money to go see some of these games if my health allows it.
Yep.
Because I told you all these World Cups that I've been to, but this is clearly, and I've been to a number of women's World Cups. In fact, the last one in 2023 in Australia.
Oh, wow.
So amazing.
But these are the ones that your wife allows you to go to, is what you're saying.
Yeah. She completely allows me to go to it. She doesn't join me.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, hey, if you need a date in 2026, you give me a call. I'd be very, very, very thrilled to go to watch a game with you at some point because, like I've said before, I truly owe your intellect a lot for my being as interested in the game as I am, because a very, very weird niche of, cultural interest and a need for something to become obsessed with ended me up listening to that Grant Wall episode you were on. And I got a couple of your books and tore through them over the course of, I'm not the most educated person, so some of the words were kind of big for me, but I did make my way through both Offside and Gaming the World. And I know I need to read a couple more of your books, but yeah, I'm very grateful that that we're still in touch and that you answered my email this week.
Let's remain in touch. Email me your address because I want to send you my memoir, which I think you'll find because there's a lot of soccer in there.
I would imagine.
54 is a lot of soccer. And thank you for having me. It's just a pleasure and an honor.
Hey, well, thank you so much, Andy. It's been a pleasure and an honor for me. And yeah, we'll hopefully find another time that you can come on and we can maybe have some less biographical but more specific topics maybe as we head closer to the World Cup. You can what was the name of the character that Grant referred you to?
Charles Grodin.
Charles Grodin. Okay. Well, yeah, maybe you can occasionally Charles Grodin your way onto our podcast as well.
You are Letterman, so you are the boss. You are
it feels good. It feels good to be in charge.
Exactly. On and I come. Absolutely.
Terrific. Well, thank you again, Andy. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening. This has been Stone by Stone, and we hope you check out the next episode as well. Have a great rest of your day. Ahoy there. Thank you for listening to Stone by Stone, an Edgewater Castle podcast. Be sure to listen to our next episode, or better yet, subscribe to our channels on YouTube, where you can find video versions of our episodes, Spotify, Apple Music, or anywhere else you get your podcast fix. We'll have a lot of exciting new content coming up throughout the year, and we want you to stay along for the ride. In fact, you should probably just follow us on all social media platforms also. Just to be safe. And with that, I leave you be. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you so much for supporting the club, listening to the podcast, and as per usual, go Rooks.